And so it's being able to separate your identity from productivity. And I think that's something that a lot of high performers really have a problem with, where it's like, you are not your productivity. You are all of these other things, right? Because your identity is much more of like, hey, what are my values? What are my morals, right? Your role is, hey, I'm going to be a dentist right now. I'm going to be a father right now. I'm going to be husband, brother, etc.
I cannot wait for you guys to listen to this episode with Gabriel Rocha. He is a sports performance and mental performance coach who works primarily with professional athletes and fighter pilots. But I thought we could use the things he talks about in dentistry. So, how do we manage our stress when an extraction or a root canal goes wrong? How do we keep our cool, make the best of our situation? How do we not let us bring us down for the rest of the day? To how do we maximize our career in all aspects, our personal life, our dental life? So, this was a really cool talk, and you guys are going to learn a lot about how we can learn from the best athletes and military personnel. Enjoy. What does your mom call you? Or what does your family call you?
Well, my mom calls me Gabriel. She has the Mexican.
Okay.
So if you guys want to go with that, we
Yeah.
can go with that as well. But Gabriel or Gabe, both work.
Okay. Awesome. Are those like orange filtered glasses?
Yeah, the blue light blockers.
So have you found, when did you start wearing them? Because I remember when blue light blockers became a thing. Um, what are they used for? Yeah, okay. So what are they supposed to do for me?
So at least the way that I've come to understand it. So I take most of my client calls like at night. And so I usually wear them at night because most of the day I've spent looking at screens when I'm at work, if I'm doing like admin stuff. And so I wear them at night just to help with like the blue light from the computer. And then I've also got this lamp right here that's like directly in my face to kind of lighten things up a little bit. So it just kind of helps with that, especially at night. But first thing in the morning, I like to wear them just to kind of curb the intensity of the light from the computer screen.
Interesting. Um, what did you want to be when you quote unquote grew up? I find people, I like asking this question to people who aren't doctors, lawyers, dentists, because, when we're in elementary school, everyone wants to be president or a doctor. I don't think anyone ever grows up thinking they'd be a mental performance coach, if that's the right way of saying it, for athletes and the Air Force, which is very cool. Like, it's a very cool job, but kind of how did this come about?
Yeah, so honestly, like growing up, I wanted to be a fighter pilot. And the reason why is because when I was like 4 years old, I used to watch Top Gun with my dad on replay. So we would sit down on the couch on weekends and we would throw on the VCR and the cassette tape into the VCR and we'd sit there and watch Top Gun. And so originally my goal was to be a fighter pilot. Like I still remember some of my earliest memories. I'd have like the little fighter jet toys and I'd be like in the bathtub, like supposed to be taking a bath and I'm playing with the fighter jets and making them dogfight and stuff. My mom walks in and she's like, "Hey, you're supposed to be like actually bathing yourself. What are you doing?" I'm in there for like 20 minutes. The water's cold already. And so being able to be a mental performance coach for fighter pilots and instructor pilots, I always tell them, I have the second best job in the world. You guys have the best job in the world.
Mhm. I am just part of you because, Tony and I did some very cursory background research. There's obviously a reason that you are not a fighter pilot, whether you've probably talked about it on other podcasts, so you don't have to rehash it. But this is kind of going to venture into our first dental question. Oh, sorry. By the way, for everyone listening, this is Gabriel Roca. Did I pronounce that right?
Rocha.
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 Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Rocha. So he is a mental performance expert for athletes and fighter pilots. And so I connected with him through the internet, like we all do nowadays.
Yep.
And usually this is very tailored to young dentists and even some older dentists. But was thinking a lot of people in high pressure, if you could call our profession high pressure, even inside the operatory and outside the operatory, we get a lot of stressors, right? Whether it's performance stress or like Gabriel and I had talked offline a little bit about imposter syndrome. am I supposed to be here? So I thought it'd be very cool because personally, I'm an amateur bodybuilder, but I feel like I approach everything. I try to approach everything I do like an athlete would. You know, Gabriel, you wanted to be a fighter pilot. I'm a white Jewish kid. I probably wanted to make it to the NBA at some point,
Yep.
but I stopped growing at 5'11". But I try and think of how an athlete would go about it, right? And so I try and take that approach in dentistry as well. But that can be very fatiguing, right? Just over time. So first to go back to the fighter pilot, right? A lot of us have dreams of being a certain dentist, reaching a certain age and having a certain point in their career, maybe something in the bank account, but they're not there. It kind of eats away at you. You know, I'm kind of going through this. Me and Tony talk all the time. You wanted to be a fighter pilot, but you're not for whatever reason. Does that still eat away at you a little bit? Like, how have you kind of rationalized something that you loved so dearly when you were younger that, hey, it's just not in the cards right now or ever?
So I think I struggled with this a lot more when I was contracting over in Columbus, Mississippi, because that's where I was part of the undergraduate pilot training pipeline, which is where everyone who is trying to become a pilot for the Air Force, they go to one of three undergraduate training sites, either Columbus, Mississippi, Del Rio, Texas, or Vance in Oklahoma. And so when I was over in Columbus, that's where I would see everyone who's like going through the initial pipeline. They start with T6 trainers, and then from there they either go to like the mobility side or they go to the fighter jet side. And I think that when I was there, that was when I struggled with it most because I was seeing people actually earn their wings and become fledgling fighter pilots. And I would go and I would sit on the flight line with my coffee some mornings and I would watch them going off on their sorties to go fly. And I was just like, man, what if I had done that? Like, do I think I could have done that? And especially having like the mental performance background and seeing the things that they struggle with and giving them the tools to overcome, performance anxiety, managing those stressors, etc. There was always a part of me where I was like, if I had truly dedicated my life to becoming a fighter pilot, I think I could have done it. The main reason why I didn't end up pursuing that route is because for some reason or another, I think I have a problem with authority, and so I didn't wanna join the military, even though early on, joining the military was a dream of mine, and, like, I originally wanted to be a fighter pilot, and then through, like, my mid-teens, I wanted to be a Marine Scout sniper.
Oh.
And then I started leaning back towards the fighter pilot side of things. But there was a part of me that was just like, man, I don't know if I want to spend 20 years in the military personally, although I have a great level of respect. And so I think when I weighed out what I didn't want for my life, it made it a little bit easier to not have the thing that I did want.
That is such a great way to phrase that, and I think there's a lot of dentists that look at it retrospectively like that as well, and we've already been sucked into our careers, but similarly, it takes probably at least a decade to become a dentist if you consider it from after high school moving forward. And so if you are a young listener, that was probably a great takeaway by Gabe there on the way to look at your whole life and not just kind of say that was the one thing I always wanted was the dentist name and I'm just going to shoot for it. So I don't want to talk people out of being a dentist. I love being a dentist, but I really love that take and I think that would have helped a lot of people. If they would have heard that earlier on in their careers that you can still help in this field, but you don't necessarily have to commit yourself 1000% to that field. And the career you envisioned in the bathtub as a 4-year-old, the dentist, the fighter pilot, the MLB player, whatever it might be.
Yeah. And I
Yeah.
think that what you guys do is really important because if you guys can let people know, like, hey, this is what the actual life of being a dentist looks like. It's like, do you want the pros? Yes, everyone's thinking of the pros. They're like, yeah, I want the money, I want the status that comes with it, etc. I want to live in these cool places. But it's also, am I okay with living with the things that I don't want to do as a dentist? Like, do I want to deal with insurance? Do I want to deal with all that work? Right? Do I want to deal with people who I have to deal with people who are coming in with teeth pain, right? And it's just like, I don't know if I want to deal with all that. And so when you
Hmm.
start to weigh out, do I want my life to look like this? And also, do I not want my life to look like this? Then you can have a much clearer conversation with yourself of, do I want to do this for 20, 30 years?
Do you have like a decision matrix that you used personally or you would encourage people to use to help think through that? This is the life I want versus the life I don't want?
I mean, back when I made that decision to go pursue my undergrad, it was pretty simple. I was 17 years old and I used like a basic pros and cons list. I think
Okay.
now it's more so kind of looking at life in increments where rather than just looking at the pros and cons that I get out of trying to become these things, it's what do I want the next 5 years of my life to look like? What's going to be important to me when I'm 25 years old? What's going to be important to me when I'm 30 years old? And I think that when I was in that space and time, getting an advanced degree was really important to me. And so going back to get my master's in sport performance psychology and potentially going back to get my PhD at the time, that was really important. And I was like, I can't commit myself to the military if I want to have, a master's or a PhD by the time I'm X years old.
Hmm. Yeah.
How do you deal with athletes and, you know, fighter pilots who struggle with that? I thought I'd be here at this point. I feel like I was promised a bill of goods that I never got. This is taking a real toll on me. I feel like I've wasted part of my life because I feel that sometimes I feel like I'm in a profession what my mom promised me being a dentist would be when I was in 10th grade. I'm turning 30 this year. It is not even close to where I thought I'd be, what she said it would be, and it really sucks sometimes.
I think it's about gearing the conversation towards what can you really appreciate about where you're at currently. And I The conversation sounds a bit different between athletes and pilots because obviously with pilots, a lot of their autonomy is taken away from them with being in the military. The military decides like, hey, you're going to be stationed here, right? You're going to be here for X amount of time. For some of the pilots, they plan on going through a training pipeline for X amount of months, and then that gets delayed and they spend an extra 6 months or an extra year going through that training pipeline. And they're thinking to themselves, well, I was hoping to be done with undergraduate pilot training by the time I'm 24. And it's like, oh, you're 25, 26, and you're still stuck here. And then also, not only did you not get the aircraft you wanted, because so the way it works is when you go through undergraduate pilot training, you start in the T6. And then from there, you figure out, or at least when I was at Columbus, you figure out if you're going either the mobility side, which is like the heavy aircraft, the tankers, or if you're going to go through the fighter bomber pipeline, which is like your fighter jets, your B 2 bombers, your B 1s, etc. And so you don't know what track you're going until you finish T6s. And that's a very competitive space to be in because everyone in the class is fighting to get what they want. And so from there, there's also a third option, which is called a FAPE, which is a first assignment instructor pilot, which is a 3-year assignment where they go send you to where I'm currently at, where we train instructors. And then you come
Mm.
back to the base where you went through the undergraduate pipeline for 3 years to instruct, and then you find out if you go heavies or
Wow.
fighter jets. And so they don't know what they're actually signing up for. But the major conversations that I have with the pilots, especially that become FAPEs, that have to spend 3 more years instructing rather than going to the airframe they want, is how do we make the best of it? What are you going to get from this process? And what I find is that they're able to lean more towards the experience that they get, because when you come back to me instructor, like, you're flying twice a day pretty regularly, and so you're gonna rack up well over 1,000 hours in those 3 years, which means that when you go to your next airframe, you're gonna be in a much better position in terms of airmanship, your decision making, understanding rules of flight. You've now learned not only how to learn, but you've also learned how to teach, which helps you in that next phase as well.
Hmm.
And so it's getting them to see what are you getting out of this process of, not adhering to the timeline that you were hoping for, but still able to maximize it in terms of your career.
Are
That's
there
awesome.
any concrete appreciation strategies that you like to use?
Concrete, I would
Like, right, for 30 days, write down 3 things that you're do you like those sorts of exercises that you might find in a self-help book? Or is yours more talkative and you'll figure it out yourself?
Right. I would say that my approach is much more talkative, at least with the pilots, because they have so much to do. It's like, I don't want to add more
Mhm.
homework onto your plate that isn't going to directly help you with flying. but I always make myself available. I'm walking through their flight rooms and like I'll see them walking down the hallway because I'm embedded into their squadron. And I'll just talk to them for a few minutes, just like, hey, how are we feeling about becoming a FAPE? And then it's like, oh, almost every single time that I've talked to someone, it's been, I'm coming around to the idea now because I think they go through this like the 7 phases of grief where it's I didn't get the airframe I wanted, and now I have to spend 3 years of my life doing this thing that I didn't want to do. But they
Hmm.
also understand what they're signing up for when they join the military. And so I think it's getting to that point of acceptance and then also recognizing, hey, one, there are people who I really liked that I'm going to get to go back and fly with coming back to this base. Two, I'm going to become a better pilot for it. And then three, I can actually just appreciate even when I'm stuck in Del Rio, Texas, down and there's nothing to do, or Vance in Oklahoma. Um, but no, I don't give them any sort of like homework. But I think that's a
Hmm.
good idea and probably something that would be good for your students who maybe they don't match to where they want to be at, et cetera.
Hmm.
You know what I was hearing through that, and correct me if I'm wrong, but it was like you can't always set, I wrote it down. You got to control your expectations, and I think that's true in all facets of life, especially dentistry, especially the military. Um so you got to control your expectations, but still have goals for yourself. You can't just say, "Oh my God, the world has the hands on the wheel, and I'm just going to go where it takes me." You got to have those goals, but you also, I think dentists are especially critical of themselves. Alex was mentioning, I'm 5 years out of school, and I'm like, why don't I own a practice? Why am I not making $1 million a year? Why have I not done 50,000, whatever it is? Um, but I can't control all of those things, and I got to have those goals. So just from a very overview like perspective, outside sports, outside the military, outside dentistry, do you have a way that people can always just center themselves, control what they can control if they get in one of those settings where they're like, "Oh my God, I'm behind, I'm behind, I'm behind."
Yeah, and it's actually something that I stole from another mental performance coach. His name is Drake Davis. You guys can
Mhm.
find him on Instagram. His Instagram handle is at Sip Drake, SIPDRAKE. And
Okay.
he's pretty popular in the mental performance space. And one thing that he talks about is it's a phrase, it's utterly dedicated and utterly detached. So it's am I controlling everything that I can in terms of moving towards this goal and trying to influence the outcome? Knowing that I can't actually control the outcome. So I'm utterly dedicated to the process of putting myself in the best position, but I'm utterly dedicated from the outcome because I don't actually have control of it. And what ends up happening for a lot of people, especially for high performers, is when you set the expectation that you're going to achieve an outcome that you cannot control, whatever that outcome is, you usually end up attaching it to your identity. So it's I didn't get the outcome, therefore I am somehow less than or I am a failure. But
Mhm.
the reason why you're doing that is because you are now viewing that outcome as though it's somehow greater than the process of all the things that you are doing that you can control to put you in that best position. So for you guys, like, you said you're 5 years out of school, you don't own your own practice yet. Part of that is also understanding what have I learned in the process, right? What's going to benefit me for when I do go to open my own practice? And also, how do I continue to get better so that way when I do open my own practice, I'm not falling into some of the main pitfalls that other dentists before me have fallen into. Because I'm sure there are plenty of dentists that when they look back to opening their own practice, they're probably thinking to themselves, hey, I probably could have done this better. I could have hired someone to do this for me. I could have outsourced this. I could have spent less time worrying about this and spent more time focusing on this. And so all those things are very process oriented. And I think that when you can identify what are things that are directly in my control and things that are not directly in my control, choosing to then focus your attention onto those things. As dentists, you guys are going through dental school, your ability to focus your attention for long periods of time and study, like you've obviously proven that you're capable of directing your attention where you need it to go. But for some reason, when we're looking at goals and things that we now attach to our identity, you no longer incorporate that skill of being able to focus on the right thing for an extended period of time. You're focusing on the wrong thing. So it really comes down to having the self awareness of, am I focusing on the right thing? And if I'm not, can I shift my focus to the right thing?
I don't know, for anyone watching this on our YouTube can see the dumb smile on my face. I thought this would be like a really cool pod. I had chills when you were talking about that
I
because
did
it's
too, man.
definitely something I can use. And that like, I think we forget the skill we had to study for hours, and not even, maybe it wasn't just 1 8-hour session, but maybe it was, we were up till 4 o'clock, 2 o'clock studying it. We're a little tired, but we made that sacrifice. And looking back, like, oh, if we could do that to learn about the stupid mitochondria, why don't we apply that same sort of focus, right, to whatever goal, or realize that, hey, we've done it before. Just because it hasn't happened yet doesn't mean it won't happen in the future. It's just not how I thought it would be. And stress, the S word, I feel like it doesn't really mean much because everyone says everything is stressful, but I know that's a topic Tony and I really wanted to talk about.
Yeah.
Um, in the actual operatory, right? We have a big procedure, even a small procedure that we think goes easy and it goes wrong.
Hmm.
How do we keep ourselves centered? Because obviously that snowball, we keep thinking about our mistakes. Oh, how am I going to get out of this? It's maybe a situation we're not familiar with. How do you coach your clients that when stuff goes wrong, how do we minimize that downfall?
What would be a good example of something like an early student or early dentist where they might find themselves in that position?
They're taking the tooth out and
Okay.
it looks simple on the x-ray. We've told the patient, hey, it'll be a piece of cake, which is always a mistake. You learn very quickly. You always tell them it's going to be the hardest thing in the world, but you've done it a million times. And, but you start taking that tooth out, it's not budging. Or you numb them and they have all the typical signs of numbness, but they can feel everything. So
Mm,
suddenly you're almost at the end of your education, right? You're trying to figure out how to kind of maneuver around this gray situation, but you're just freaking out inside. Obviously, as the dentist, the person with the letters after their name, I feel like you need to stay calm, or else if you can't keep your calm, at least on the outside, everyone else is going to sense it.
mhm.
Um, how do you tell people to talk to themselves, have that inner dialogue? Because sometimes we have procedures and we go, hey, unfortunately, I couldn't do this. We're going to send you to a specialist. It happens. And every time that's happened, if I manage the situation well, the patient's like, hey, I get, like, it sucks. Yeah. You know, but they end up fine. Everyone has survived. But within that situation, rather than making it a disaster, how would you manage your emotions and your stress?
Right. Well, I think the first thing is coming down to what does the internal dialogue sound like? And so, especially for like when my pilots are up in the air and they're in the cockpit and they make a mistake, right? Especially if it's like a simple mistake that they shouldn't, or they're doing something sort of non-standard. It's, can I focus my self dialogue on the task itself rather than self evaluation? Because oftentimes, what ends up happening in those stressful moments is you're not actually thinking about the task. Like you might have the internal thought of, like, oh, shoot, what do I do here? But typically it then shifts to, oh, what are they going to think about me? Right? What are the people in the room going to think about me? How is the energy that I'm giving off affecting the environment? And none of those actual thoughts are helping you to actually get to control the actual task itself. And so for the pilots that I work with, and this is one that we taught really early on into UPT, it was an acronym, which is ANC, which is Aviate, Navigate, Communicate. And so as a pilot, when something starts going wrong or something non-standard happens, the first thing you need to do is aviate first. So it's like, can I get my airspeed, my altitude, and my heading correct before I start trying to recalibrate my situational awareness about everything else that's going on? And so it's okay, first things first, I need to prioritize the most important thing right now. And a lot of times it's going to be, can I direct my attention to these two or three basic things? And then I can focus on navigating, which is okay, I've got the airspeed, altitude, and heading correct. I'm going in the correct direction at the correct airspeed, at the correct altitude. Where am I going to? And then once I've oriented that, then it's okay, now I can communicate either to my instructor in the back or I can communicate to air traffic control tower. And so it really just comes down to, can I prioritize my attention towards what the what the self-talk dialogue sounds like? And so in that moment, rather than having those self-evaluative thoughts, it's having that self-awareness piece initially to say, hey, my thought spiral is not helping me right now. The main thing I need to focus on is X. And I'm sure that you guys as dentists, like, I don't know anything about dentistry. So I can't tell you like, hey, here's the thing you need to focus on. But I can tell you like, hey, here's the framework that you would use to then focus on the right thing. So say a tooth extraction isn't going correctly. What would be the first thing that you need to focus on as a dentist to either be able to complete that tooth extraction or be able to say, hey, you know what? This is out of my scope. I need to send you to someone else.
I mean, I think we should actually kind of flesh this out, Tony, because
Yeah, I was just gonna say,
I
let's
have my
talk
own
it.
system. So I find the first thing when something's either not moving or breaking or I can't feel a grasp on it, it's like, what can I see? You
Mhm.
know? And is there a problem with me seeing? Like, do we need to make sure I could? Because I have found that if I can physically see everything, I can get myself out of it. Right. But sometimes, so you can only see this much of the tooth, and this much of the root is always in bone. It's literally enveloped.
Yeah.
So I always say for a lot of dentistry, we're fighting the invisible enemy.
Mhm.
And so let's say the top part of the tooth breaks and we just have that part that's in the bone. My first thought is, okay, given where I'm at, can I physically see the piece that I'm looking for? Right. No. And then I go through, okay, the principles to get a tooth out are X and Y. If I can't see, this is probably like Aviate. I need to make sure that the physical environment, I can actually see what I'm doing.
Mhm.
Right, Tony? Does it sound like a little too basic or elementary?
So honestly, I don't know. A couple years in, I did this exact thing, and what I started doing like a year and a half ago was, and for example, let's say we're doing an extraction or a root canal, all hell is broken loose. It's not moving. Whatever. It broke off the crown. I have this new thing where after like 15 minutes of trying, I will literally stop. I'll tell the patient sometimes the best medicine is time. I'm going to have my assistant take an X-ray, and I'll be back in just
Mhm.
a couple minutes. And I literally let them take the X-ray. I step out of the op. I like go to my chair, take a piss, drink a water. And I know you can't do this as a fighter pilot, so I apologize. But I will literally just go like kind of literally just chill for a second and be like, dude, what are you freaking out about? What's going wrong? I'll look at the X-ray, kind of like you're getting at, see what's hidden. Um, and then I'll go back in. And I just found that if in 15 minutes I haven't moved the needle at all, that approach ain't working. And I need to step back. I need to like reconvene, settle myself,
Mhm.
and then reevaluate the move. And I kind of view that as my A, right? I'm kind of like reevaluating my avenue. Am I cutting at the right angles? If you're doing a root canal, that X-ray will show you, is your access even in line with the pulp chamber? Are you going way to one side or whatnot? So I know none of this means much to you, Gabe, but I think in the dental world, sometimes I always just say that line to your patient. Sometimes the best medicine is time. We're just going to give this 5 minutes, take an X-ray, and I'll be right back. The patients are like, "Great, brother, I needed a break anyways." So, it ends up being a win-win-win. Everyone's chill, and I literally have found that you come back in with a better game plan. You've
Mhm.
aviated.
Mhm.
Um, in my
Navigates
world, I
by the
work
new
with
plan,
another doc.
right?
Sometimes I'll go in, Dr. Wood, man, look at this X-ray with me. What would you do? Oh, dude, you've got the wrong elevator. Get this other one, and then you're like, boom, got it.
Mhm.
Go in there, try his approach, boom, tooth out in 2 minutes. So use your resources. Take a second to take a step back. I guess that would be when I heard all of that. I was like, my approach is step back.
Yeah. I was gonna say, and I think that's a really, really good strategy as well when it's available to you. So, like you said, my fighter pilots, they don't get the luxury of being able to step out of the cockpit when they're mid sortie. But for my
Mhm.
athletes that I work with, especially like my bodybuilders who are in the gym and say they have like a really bad set, right? Where they're like, oh, like my setup was wrong, or like I'm just not feeling strong today. I will literally tell them, go take a lap around the gym, recalibrate, and then take a sip of water, go take a piss, whatever, come back to the next set. And then make the focus on doing the best you can do in that next moment. But what I think that really works well in your strategy is creating that physical separation because I think this the
Yes.
physical
Yes.
separation allows you to then see much more clearly, because when you're
Yes.
in the heat of the moment in a performance, there's part of you that like attaches your identity and your competence to being able to solve that problem in the here, in the now.
Hmm.
And so a lot of people might see me needing to step away for 10 or 15 minutes as, oh, well, the patient's going to think I'm incompetent and then they're going to lose confidence in me. And so I need to solve this problem right here, right now, under this amount of duress that I have now placed upon myself.
Hmm.
But that's a perspective that you have. It's a story you've created in your own mind. And
Yeah.
so if we can shift the story to, hey, actually, kind of like Alex was saying, it's like when I tell that patient, hey, I need to take 5 or 10 minutes to have you take these x-rays. I'm going to go relook at the x-rays. There's probably going to be a little bit of a sigh of relief, but that's not something that we
Yes.
tend to
Yes.
view ourselves because we're thinking worst case scenario. And if I tell the patient, hey, you're going to be here for an extra 10 or 15 minutes, they're going to be like, oh, like I was trying to leave, right? Because dentists also understand people don't love going to the dentist most times. And so there's probably like a subconscious part of you that's like, I want to get this person out of here as quickly as possible because I know most people don't love coming to the dentist, especially for a procedure.
Hmm.
And so it's being able to then view yourself through the lens of, hey, I'm trying to make the best decisions possible. And
Hmm.
sometimes that means physically separating myself from what I would call like the arena, right? If you can take a time out, which you have the luxury of doing, you are the one who's in control of the situation, right? So when we talk about control, it's like your uncontrollable variables are, the environment, like what the patient's thinking in that moment, but you
Hmm.
have direct control over, hey, we're going to take a 5 minute time out. I'm gonna have you go take
Hmm.
some x-rays and then I'll be right back. Right.
Yep.
And so it's leveraging as many different strategies as you can, or at least knowing you have them in your pocket, because that will also create confidence when you know I've got a tool here that I can use, or I've got this other tool here that I can use. And so you don't feel like you're back up against the wall where I have to solve this problem right here, right now.
Quick little pause here to ask you guys for a favor. If you have learned even one thing from Mr. Rocha, let us know in the comments. Let us know what you learned. Subscribe to this podcast if you haven't already, only if you guys want to be the best dentists you can be. And send this to your friends. I think it's really cool that we can learn from people of all different backgrounds, all different jobs. It doesn't have to be just dentists. So what everyone does is they want to plug their own content. But honestly, if there's one thing you do, please follow Gabe at Rocha, ROCHA underscore sports psych on Instagram and show him some love. Because if there's one thing we want to do is support others. Now enjoy the rest of the pod, guys. Thank you very much.
Yep. That's exactly the situation I've lived so many times.
Mhm.
I can't believe how well you articulated the life of a dentist, having never extracted a
Right.
tooth yourself.
I'll extract my own teeth. No, I'm kidding.
Yeah. It's funny. There was some posts. It was our friend out of to him. He's like, what's the funniest or what's the worst thing you've heard a patient say? Like, or no, what do you say when you walk in the door to a patient? Everyone was giving these like awful, but the one I like most, it's like, I know, I hate me too. Right. Because I feel like we're one of the only professions where we don't say anything. The
Yeah.
patient's like, I hate the dentist. Right. And immediately, because it's a healthcare profession, I mean, and this is the next topic I wanted to talk about. In every fighter pilot, bodybuilder, dentist, whatever, we feel like we need to be perfect all the time.
Mhm.
Um, and I have learned two things. One is, look, if you just, you fought with your spouse, um, something went wrong the day before, not that it's going to make it the next day, but it's going to have an effect. You can't
Sure.
control that. Like it happened, right? But also, you try and check your ego, you try and leave everything at the door, because when you're in there, we feel like we have to be perfect all the time for our staff, for our patients. And I think that's unsustainable. So question number one, talking about these procedures, I have found, like last week, posted on Instagram, I took out a full mouth of teeth. The front desk or the office manager scheduled me all day. I was like, shoot, man, I've done this before,
Mhm.
half a day, 4 hours. Doctor time was like an hour and a half, 2 hours. I saw the patient the next day. They're healing beautifully. And I feel like I'm on top of the world. I am associating my identity with the outcome of a procedure rather than maybe the education that or the amount of time I took to try and perfect my craft, right? And then the next day I'll have like the easiest filling in the world and I'll have to redo it twice. And I just can't get it. And then I'm like, crap, I am the worst dentist in the world, right? A bodybuilder, they have a set or a show or a workout and they're like, I've done everything. I've left my ego at the door. They get fourth place.
Mhm.
And they're like, crap, like this, my identity, they're associating the outcome with the identity. So how do you help people separate, like you said, the outcome of the clinical work, like what they actually did from how they feel about themselves, just so they can keep going and keep getting better? Because the next time you do it, you'll get first place. The working out will be flawless.
Yeah. So I think the first thing here is understanding that whatever you're feeling, quote unquote, is a temporary state, right? We know that emotions and perceptions of self are not things that are typically stable across time. Like you just said, if I go out and I crush a procedure, then I feel really, really good. But chances are, by the end of the day, maybe I don't feel so good, or maybe I don't still have that same high, right? Next day comes around, like you said, really simple fill in. I don't do it as well as I would like to. Temporary state now has you in like a negative headspace. But I think what ends up happening is because as human beings, we have a negativity bias, which, back when we were cavemen, this was a really good survival skill. It's like, hey, I see a saber-toothed tiger over there walking around. That thing could probably eat me. I'm going to stay away from it. That negativity bias has survived in our brain throughout thousands and thousands of years. And so we always focus on worst possible case scenario. Now, the way that that has transformed over time into performances is we now see those negative outcomes or negative perspectives, and then we attribute it to, hey, this one data point of this one fill in is somehow an accurate description of my competency. And what you're doing in that moment is you're completely discounting every other thing that you've done and letting that one data point influence your state. And so, one way I see this, especially like with my bodybuilders who are in prep, is, in prep, we're trying to lose body fat. And so, your goal is I'm hopefully losing weight every single week. But what they end up doing is they weigh themselves every morning and, their weight might be trending down. And then one day, like they're up a pound and a half. And all of a sudden they freak out and they're like, oh my God, I'm not losing fat anymore. I just gained a pound and a half of fat overnight. And what you're really doing is you're saying this one data point supersedes all of the other data points. And what we know about the learning process is that over a long period of time, one, you're going to make mistakes. That is where some of the best learning happens. And so I think you guys can probably point out like a simple procedure that didn't go as well as you would have liked, where you were like, oh, guess what? I'm never going to make that mistake again. But it's viewing that as an opportunity to learn where it's like, hey, I'm downloading more data into this computer up here rather than saying, oh, hey, this one performance is indicative of who I am. Because now, like you said, you are integrating the performance with your identity. If you're saying this data point is who I am, rather than this is just a part of me becoming a better dentist, is problem solving through these problems.
How do you get people to not take this stuff so seriously? Because I think back, um, I feel like, I mean, every dentist, everyone, I hate when people say, "Oh, I'm a perfectionist." Yeah, the profession kind of self-selected for it, but so are athletes, so are fighter. Well, I hope fighter pilots think they're perfectionists. Like when the higher you get, you kind of self-select for these traits.
Mhm.
And I hope this doesn't come off the wrong way, but it's just teeth. It's not heart surgery. Um, their life isn't on the line. And I try and reframe that because I feel like the more pressure when I'm trying to, like, if it's a single tooth and I got 3 hours, I'm like, this is going to be the most perfect work in the world. And yesterday I was out and my buddy is like, I'm almost 30. He's 24. He's like, dude, you have so many gray hairs. And I'm like, dentistry, man. Like, you know, But at the end of the day, what's really helped me is like, it's just teeth. It's just lifting weights. I honestly, for the military, it might be different because it's your life actually is on the line. But for maybe the people listening to this podcast, it's good to take your job seriously.
Mhm.
But if you take it too seriously, you're actually going to do better work. Because I find that, hey, if I can finish a crown in 20, 25 minutes and it's straightforward, that's probably better than the crown that took me an hour and a half, right? It probably went smoother. So how can we take ourselves less seriously?
Mhm. So I don't ever want people to minimize the severity or the seriousness of the work that they do, whether it's bodybuilding, dentistry, being a pilot, etc. So it ends up being more about what standard am I holding myself to? Because again, when we start talking about things that are in our control, it's like the standards that we hold ourselves to are in our control. And that's going to influence the type of work that we're doing or the amount of studying or the amount of extra education, right? But what ends up happening is that a lot of times, like when you focus too much on the outcome, like you said, like, hey, I am a perfectionist. It's like what you're really saying is that the outcome has to be perfect for me to feel X about my work. But we also know one, that is an unrealistic standard to hold yourself to, that every single operation or procedure is going to go perfectly. And two, we also need to give ourselves space to understand that, hey, I am a human being, I am flawed. And while the client that you're working with or the patient that you're working with is expecting a certain level of quality, because obviously like you don't want to give them a shitty fill-in, right? Or a shitty
Mhm.
crown.
Yeah.
It is how closely can I operate to that high standard I've set for myself, knowing that I'm not always going to get that perfection that I'm seeking. And I think that when you can really start to separate yourself from this unrealistic expectation of perfection and more towards, hey, what's good enough? And then what is between good enough and perfection? And can I
Mhm.
live in this space
Yeah.
knowing that I'm going to fall short of here? I think that's a good way to start approaching it because, like you said, even with bodybuilders, like I'm not going to have the perfect workout and PR every single time I'm stepping in the gym, right? I'm not going to have that linear progression across lists all of the time. And similarly, as dentists, you're not going to have the perfect procedure, the perfect operation every single time. And so part of that comes down to, again, separating yourself from the outcome, controlling what you can, and then also understanding, like, no, I am human. I'm not going to get it right every single time, but I'm also going to give myself the space to understand that.
I want to take that maybe even one step deeper, actually. Um, Kind of the concept of leave it at the door. And this probably resonates more deeply with military folks than dentists, but I know a lot of dentists lose sleep at night thinking about cases. I grew up in Colorado Springs. All my friends are military family. So the idea of PTSD and those things obviously resonates deeply. So um, the idea of leaving a bad crown at the door and sleeping at night is far easier than some sort of war trauma. But how can you coach people on that leaving it at the door, leaving it at the office type idea so that you can sleep, so that you can maintain some level of your life? Even knowing you lived in that space where you were supposed to be, it still eats and haunts at people, I think. So, any ideas there?
I think being able to identify role versus identity is a big one. And so this is actually, I'm actually taking this one from Dr. Haley Perlis, who she's a sports psychologist. She worked with Olympic athletes and she's actually someone I look up to. She's a good mentor of mine. And one of the conversations we had was about role versus identity. And so what ends up happening for a lot of us high performers is we view those performances through the lens of this is who I am, when in reality, it's like you guys wear lots of different hats throughout the day. So these are your different roles. So you guys are a son to someone, that is a role, right? You are, if you guys have siblings, you are a brother, right? If you guys have a spouse, like you are a spouse, you are a dentist. So all of these different roles require different traits that make you successful at them. And so what ends up happening a lot of times is like we tend to take the traits that make us really successful in the workplace and then we also bring them home. So that like really acute attention to detail that you need to
Hmm.
have when you're wearing your dentist hat, is probably not going to be super conducive to other areas of your life. And so I think it's being able to create the separation between like, hey, when I get home, I am no longer dentist, right? It's taking off the dentist hat and recognizing like, hey, for these next 3 hours, like if I have a spouse at home and I've got kids, then it's like I am husband and I am dad. I'm not dentist right now. But a lot of times, like we keep that dentist switch on when we get home because we identify so closely with like being a dentist is my identity, not my role. And so when you can really separate out that like, hey, when I get home, I am wearing this hat right now. Then you start to shift your focus on, okay, what are the things that make me a good dad? What are the things that make me a good partner? Because I don't want to bring all of the stuff home from dentist work that are then going to influence my ability to be present in these other areas. And hopefully, like I understand, like if you've made it to be a dentist, chances are like you've been switched on for a really long time
Y-
because
Yeah.
that's what got you through dental school. But there's also, okay, how do I shut it off for a couple of hours? That way I can just focus on, enjoying this meal at home, being out with my friends, being present with my kids. And it's being able to then shift your focus away. So, like we talked about already, you guys as dentists, you've been able to attune your attention in the direction you want it to for extended periods of time. Part of that is also being able to attune your attention in a different direction. So when you notice like, hey, like I'm just having this recurring thought about work, it's like, okay, can I stop and really just redirect and say, you know what, I'm not being present right now. I need to focus on this instead. And it's literally making the decision to say, I'm not going to let this consume my attention right now because I'm going to point my attention in this direction.
I think I would like to take that thought and now expand it by 50 years,
Yeah.
because the idea of longevity in these careers, we want to achieve something of no, unlike any sport or any physical endeavor, there's a time when the body starts declining. So we have a literal limited
Mhm.
physical capacity to improve and be at our best. In dentistry, yes, there is a point where we physically can't do it, like Tony's 80-year-old boss, who probably can't actually see anymore. But with technology, that that decline might start at 60. I'm 30,
Mhm.
I've got 30 years to be the best dentist I can be. What I have suffered from is right when I got out of school, I was like, I need to commit 24 hours a day to being the best dentist. And just like you said, it has led to real issues in relationships
Yeah.
where I either come home from school and my mind is on teeth. And like we're at the dinner table and I'm thinking about a case or like a post I saw, or like, my friend, my significant other, they get up and I'm like, shit, I'm on Facebook looking at that case.
Mhm.
Even if we're, not in conversation, even when but it's like my mind's always there. And I'm sure we all love all gas, no brakes, but at some point the car's going to burn out.
Yeah.
Right. So we need to be intentional. We need to apply effort. Like I think Tony is the best example. No one can see, but Tony just had his third child. Congratulations. The child is
Congratulations.
literally with him right now.
That's amazing. Congrats.
Thank you.
And Tony, I know, wants to be an amazing dentist,
Yeah.
right? But he's got a family. And if he's dentistry all the time, his wife is going to leave him.
Yeah.
But if he can't commit enough time to being a great dentist, a great practice owner, you're not going to achieve anything.
Mhm.
So how do you coach these clients or whoever that are so into their career, their field, and they want to be all these things, husband, father, practice owner, pilot, captain, lieutenant, whatever, and be like, hey, let's think about 40 years and not 5, because if you do go this hard, you might literally burn out
Yeah.
and either physically or mentally be incapable of being your best.
Mhm.
So, and this is actually something that I struggled with as well because I opened up my business in July of 2025 and I live with my girlfriend and like we had some real moments where it was like I'm sitting there like and I should be paying attention to what her day is like, right? Because she's getting her PhD in neuroscience. And so it's like I'm the dumb one in the house. Right? And it's like, hey, like you're telling me about all this really cool research that you're doing in lab and like and I'm just not present at all because I'm sitting there trying to look at like clients that are checking in with me or trying to set up onboarding new clients, et cetera. And it really came down to like, hey, I need to set like business hours for myself really. Where it's like after a certain time period, like phone comes off. And like what's really helped me is like I'll start moving my clients over to like do not disturb. I've got some clients that I use on WhatsApp, so it kind of creates that physical separation between iMessage and WhatsApp. Um, but I completely understand that feeling of like, hey, the switch is turned on at all times, really. And so when we start talking about longevity, that's a conversation that I have with all of my pilots that are coming through my training pipeline on day one, where it's, I understand you have a high standard for yourself, but also what do you want to prioritize? And there are some people where it's like they're coming through the training pipeline, like they're single, they've got no kids. And it's like, yeah, if you don't have any of those other responsibilities and you've decided for yourself that, I want to spend the middle part of my 20s building this up and making that investment of time and effort and energy into this thing, like that is totally your prerogative to do so. But if you're someone who's a little bit older, like I've got majors and lieutenant colonels where it's like they've got 3, 4 kids, they've got a spouse. It's okay, how do we create that separation where it's like when you come home, you can be dad and you can be husband or wife? And that's where the conversation becomes, okay, how do I set up systems where it's like either I have business hours for myself or I'm able to at least view myself through the lens of I can still be an effective pilot or I can still be an effective dentist and not feel like I have to put 24 hours of work in. Because a lot of times we view the work as a metric through which we view ourselves. And if we are not putting in full effort, full attention, full energy all of the time, then a lot of times, like we may view ourselves as less than, or like I should be doing these things, right? And you start talking about expectations. Expectations are what we think we should do or how the world should be. Understanding that, hey, if I've got other things that are important to me, those things need to get time, energy, and space as well. And so it's being able to separate your identity from productivity. And I think that's something that a lot of high performers really have a problem with, where it's like, you are not your productivity. You are all of these other things, right? Because your identity is much more of like, hey, what are my values? What are my morals, right? Your role is, hey, I'm going to be a dentist right now. I'm going to be a father right now. I'm going to be husband, brother, etc. So it's separating your identity from productivity, knowing that like you're still able to do the right things, right? And maybe that extends the timeline through which you open your practice by a year or two because you're spending more time being present with your family. But then you also understand like, hey, then I get to spend the joy of opening my practice with my family versus, oh yeah, I opened a practice 1 or 2 years earlier, but I've got no family.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that practice is sorry, go ahead, Tony.
I was just going to add, I can't remember which book. I read a book recently and the book was not titled this, but it was kind of about seasons of life. And
Mhm.
kind of like you're alluding to is there are periods in your life where you're going to be Kobe Bryant. Every second of your day, every second is going to be focused on whatever your task is, best fighter pilot, best bodybuilder, best dentist, and you're going to grind it out. And those seasons can be years, if not decades. But you need to probably have other seasons where you're focused on other things. Um, so I don't know. I can certainly relate to that. When I first started dental school, just had my girlfriend, who's now my wife. We had no kids. She was in med school. I was in dental school. We could study 10 hours a day all weekend. We'd go throw the frisbee for 1 hour to get out of the house.
Yeah.
And it was great. If we tried to do that now, we'd end up divorced. I mean, my kids are too young to leave us, but they'd want to leave us. So you got to have those seasons where you have those times to give back and donate time to other areas. And if you're not, they will leave you. So if you are one of those dentists, I think, um, at the end of the day, your practice might never leave you, but your wife, your kids, your husband, whatever, your family members might start to leave you. So, yeah, I really appreciated that. And I think that resonated where I'm at in life. And I appreciated your comment too, Alex.
Well,
I go ahead.
I was gonna say, I think relational communication is obviously a big portion of this as well, where when you can identify like, "Hey, I'm about to enter one of those Kobe Bryant seasons where it's like, I need to be all in focused." It's like,
Yep.
"Hey, I need to sit down with the people who are most important in my life and let them know this is what the next 6 months are going to look like. I'm gonna be spending a lot of my energy on building up the practice." And so, like, if
Hmm.
you're married and you have a husband or a wife, you might need to sit down with them and say, "Hey, babe, I love you. I want you to know that the next 6 months, like, this is what I'm expecting them to look like. Here's where I'm expecting to fall short on the relational side of things. How can I check in with you day by day, week by week to make sure that I'm at least meeting, like, the basic needs, and then how can we create systems where you still feel loved and supported and appreciated?" And so it's like, hey, if I'm working 60, 70 hours a week, that might mean your spouse might say, "Hey, if you're gonna be doing that, I need a 2-hour date night once a week. Like, we need to protect that space. Saturday night from 7 PM to 9 PM, that is date night." It's like, hire a babysitter. I don't care. But it's like, "Hey, what do I need to do to still show up for you while I'm also still showing up in this practice?" And then it's also checking in each whatever time period that you need to do, whether it's daily, whether it's weekly, to then say, "Hey, like, are we still good? Like, I know that was a really busy week. I ended up putting in 80 hours instead of 60, right?" And so being able to set those boundaries and say, What can I do to help you feel most supported? And here's what I need from you to feel most supported." And I think the second part of that conversation is really where those high performers
Yes.
tend to suffer, because
Yes.
when you're a high performer, you don't want to ask people to do things for you because you've created this identity of autonomy where it's like, I'm going to do it all myself. And I also struggle with this at times where I'm just like, "Hey, you know what? I've got 3 client calls tonight after I just worked a full day and I went training." And then it's like my girlfriend comes home and she's like, "Hey, what do you need from me?" And I'm just like, "Oh, don't worry about it. Like, when I get done with my client calls, like, I'll weigh out my meals, like, I'll take a shower, like, I'll cook my last meal." And she's like, "No, no, no. I'll weigh out your meals, and I will also have your last meal ready for you when you get off your call." And I'm just like, "Oh, thank you." It's like
Yeah.
there's a part of, like, my identity where I've almost identified that it's like, I need to do all of those things because I
Hmm.
don't want you to do them for me. But then part of that's also, killing your ego, at least in the sense where it's like, I can allow someone to help me without feeling like I am somehow, like, indebted to them, because these people, they want to see you win and they want to help you.
You have no idea how much you just punched me in the face with all of these things. Like, I feel like my wife and I have had so many of these conversations where it's like, babe, we're going to buy a practice for the next 6 to 12 months. It's going to be go time. I'm going to be gone. And while I haven't crossed that bridge, I just know I would never check back in. Hey, how's it going?
Hmm.
What can I do to help? Has this been working? Are we meeting your needs in this area? And I would just like, if we'd end up in a fight, I'd just be like, what? I told you that we were going to be doing this for the next 6 months, and get
Hmm.
all defensive instead of, and you even said it, the most important thing is to check back in and follow back up. And man, like I said, that just like, that hit me so hard. I just know that's something I've never done. I've had the same fights with my mom in the past when I was like in dental school, grinding it out, not calling. So, oh man, you gave me so much, like you just kind of changed who I'm going to be going forward. I feel like with the simple question of just checking back in.
Yeah.
So
I
yeah.
Tony having 3 kids, trying to do this practice. I mean, let's be honest, your wife probably wants to move up in her career in some fashion at some
Hmm.
point. I don't know. I'm not going to speak for her. The one thing I can't get out of my mind that Gabriel said, you're in the season and you tell your whoever, could be your best friend, your mom, your wife, I am going to fall short in these things. You are admitting that you can't do it all. Again, these high performers, I want to be a great father. I want to be the best X and Y. You can't. You just can't. They're 24 hours in a day. You sleep for so long. And if you want to be your best, you got to sleep enough,
Mhm.
right? There's not enough time to do all these things. And that's cool. First of all, if you tell your wife, hey, this is going to be a season of whatever, you better give it back when that season's
Absolutely.
over, 3 times over, 4 times
Yeah.
over, right? But
100%.
to admit defeat. I am not going to be the best boyfriend for the 6 months, for these best six, whatever that means, like, I think that takes so much courage and security in a relationship. Cause I think, and I'm sorry, I mean, I'm going to say it as guys, at least I think the type of guys that we are, and probably the types of guys, and honestly, maybe even girls in a relationship as high achievers, you're like, I need to be the do-it-all person. I need to be the leader. I need to have this image. And if there's one place to show signs of weakness, and weakness isn't even the right word, it's behind closed doors with your significant other. I would never do it in the office. You am like, hey guys, I'm on my 6 month best boyfriend or best husband. I'm not gonna be the best. No, you can't do that, right? Even if that might be the case, let's be honest. Like sometimes you're just kind of cruising clinically, the business is doing well, and you really are focusing on treating your wife. But you don't admit that to them. But when it is time to take step back's again the wrong word, but
It's a shift of
I think
focus.
a
That's all.
beautiful shift of focus. It is okay to tell them that, like, hey, for this short period of time, I'm not going to be the man that you dreamed of, but we are doing this together so that I can be that man and even more down the road.
Yeah.
Gabriel, do you have like a little bit of time? There's actually one topic that
Yeah.
I think leads into this.
Yeah.
I feel like all of our conversations have been neutral or negative. How do we get out of stress? How do we, manage? I want to take a little more positive spin. And this is where I think people can really learn the most is how do we become excellent, right? Because we're already high achieving people, but you probably coach people to actually take that next step
Yeah.
higher, whatever they are, right? So like, I know me and Tony, we try and walk in the door like every day we're going to kill it and all that stuff, but it gets tiring sometimes. So whatever your experience of positive psychology or coaching people, how do you help them take the next step up so they get even better and maintain that level of excellence?
Yeah. So for me, when I think about excellence, I think about excellence over a period of time, right? And for me, excellence is a standard that I'm holding myself to over that period of time. And I'll go back to Kobe Bryant, who is my idol. I'm born and raised in Los Angeles, so he was like my first hero. And
Mhm.
one thing that he talked about a lot is you need to stay curious, right? When you're able to foster that curiosity, that's where one, you're going to stay open to new information, but that's also where you're going to challenge yourself as well. Because what ends up happening for a lot of high performers is that you start to view potential opportunities as threats to your competency. Like if there's a challenge that presents itself and you can't figure it out, a lot of people view that as like, oh, this is threatening to how I view myself. Right. But the curious mind thinks to themselves, like, oh, what am I going to learn from trying to navigate through this adversity or through this problem set, etc. And so when you can keep a curious mind, whether it's opening a practice and understanding, like, hey, there are some pitfalls I'm going to fall into. The goal is one, to learn from them, not to avoid them altogether. And also understanding that, like, hey, I'm going to fall into certain pitfalls, but I'm not going to let that damage how I view myself. And so the first one is staying curious to foster excellence because that's going to help create a new standard when you're able to absorb new information and new data. The second part of that is um shoot, I just lost my train of thought. The second part of the excellence piece is uh viewing the margins, right? So as bodybuilders, there's like certain big movers that like you need to hit every single day. It's like sleep, food, training, recovery, right? Now, the way that we get better is like, how do we win the margins between those things? And so sometimes that's like getting better sources of food, right? Making sure that I'm optimizing for sleep, making sure that my training is a little bit better. And so when you're able to, what I call with my athletes, I call it winning the margins. So it's like, it comes down to attention to detail. It's like, what are the little details that I could be improving on once I'm hitting those big movers? So as dentists, you can probably recognize like, hey, here are the big things that I need to do to make sure that my practice is open and running, right? So it's like admin stuff, like getting your building up to code, like all those things are the big movers, right? Once you got those big foundational pieces in play, then it's okay, what's the 1% that's going to set me apart from other dental practices? Maybe it's something as simple as like, hey, how does the person who's working the front desk, how do they greet people when they walk in the door? What's the standard for that, right? What's the standard for how clean our bathrooms are, right? What does the operating room look like? All those little details are then where we start to strive for excellence. But you can't skip the foundational pieces of, what are those big movers first and foremost? Because if you do, then you're trying to run long before you've even walked. And so it's viewing the achievement of excellence as a process through which you need to get better at achieving excellence. Because what ends up happening for a lot of people is like they start something new and they want to be excellent at it already. Because, and especially for high performers, you've probably at this point, like if you got through dental school and you are a dentist, you've probably been a really high performer for most of your life. Like you went to high school, you were probably a standout in your class. You went to undergrad, probably a standout in your class. You probably got to dental school and you're surrounded by other really high performers who were really, really good in the educational system. And so part of that process is learning. I am learning these things about myself. I'm building up the foundational skills, but then I'm also setting myself apart by understanding that I'm trying to do the 1% things without letting the 1% things become the priority so much so that I lose sight of the foundation as well, where you don't obsess only about the 1%, because then you're going to lose
Mhm.
sight of the foundations that made you great in the first place.
I think a good way is like, I mean, we talk about systems. The first thing I want to say, so our thing at the educated associate is you finished dental school. We're trying to kind of help you with all the non-clinical things, navigating the real world. But I feel like the people that listen to this, they want to own a practice at some point.
Oh,
I'm going through that process now. I'm trying to acquire a practice. Tony is going to probably within the next year. And we have that fear. I don't know what I'm doing. The fact that you just said, hey, how does the front desk person greet the new patient or the patient that walked in the door? What do the bathrooms look like? That is what an A1 practice owner also thinks about. And I just hope that gives people confidence that Gabe, who has no experience in dentistry, hasn't, yeah, can think about these things. So can we. And I think again, we're so comfortable in the clinical, but when it comes to these bigger, honestly, more meaningful things, like Gabe, I bet when you started your own business, you can talk to people, you can ask them how they started their own, but
yeah,
until you do it, you have no idea, you know. I'm assuming you're like contracted through the military,
yeah.
right? When you start your own business, you have to do your own accounting. You have to do all of your own management. My guess is, and correct me if I'm wrong, you did not have any experience or much experience in that beforehand, but you did it. You know, honestly, I know dentistry seems like a bigger deal. Like it's not, you kind of nailed it. You know, the patient walks in the door. How do you get them in the chair? How do you make them happy? How do you get them money? How do you get them out safely? Right. Um, but you figure it out. And once you have those, like, how long do you think it took you to nail the basics of your own business?
I think I've still got room to improve on the basics, right?
Right.
Because when I think of like front end, back end stuff as well, it's like some of it's still kind of clunky. And part of that's just because I'm a first time business owner. I haven't even been in business for a year yet. And so, and this goes back to the staying curious, right? It's like I'm learning, especially because I run most of my business through Instagram. Like up until I opened up my business, Instagram for me was just like a fun thing. It was like, oh, like I'm just going to post a bunch of like nonsense and like bodybuilding videos. And so part of the learning process is like, hey, how do I position myself as an authority on sport performance psychology, right? Part of the learning process is like, how do I handle DM conversations with potential clients? How do I handle then like the actual calls? Like, right. And so I'd never done any of that before because everything was already given to me through my contracted job. It's like, hey, you
Mhm.
have pilots who are coming to you for scheduled syllabus events. Like, your office space has a closed door in the squadron. So it's like you're given all of these things versus when you're a business owner, it's like you're figuring it all out. But I didn't kick myself for not knowing how to do these things because I also understand like I've been a beginner at things so many times in my life that I've allowed myself to view being a beginner as a good thing. And I'm now viewing these things that like I've I've not closed on clients who are like warm leads, right? And part of that's learning. It's like, okay, what could I have done differently? Right? How could I have followed up differently with that person? Right? There have been times where it's like I've gotten on a call with someone and the conditions weren't as ideal as I would like them to be. Part of that's like, I'm trying to build out like this little office space for myself. It's like, how do I make it more professional? How do I make it cleaner? The back end stuff, can I automate a system to send out the invoice already? Right. And so it's like, as I'm going through this learning process, I recognize like I'm human. I've never owned a business before. I only know like one or two other people who are in the mental performance space specifically who own their own businesses. Because a lot of them are like contracted with like major league teams, NBA teams, etc. But then I try to ask them and stay curious, like, hey, what are some of the common pitfalls that you had? And a lot of them are like either front end or back end stuff. Because I feel very confident in like the human to human connection piece, where it's like if we sit down for an hour and we talk about sport performance psychology and how I can help you, like I'm fine with that. But it's what is like the branding, the marketing looking like? What did the invoicing and back end stuff look like? And then giving myself the space to recognize like, hey, I'm not going to do it perfectly every time. And there's going to be opportunities that I might miss out on because some of the front end or back end stuff might not be polished yet. But that's just more data for me to then say, oh, that system needs to be reworked. Cool. Is that in my control? Yes. Okay, well, then let's rework that
Mhm.
system.
I think that's the most important thing you could ask yourself. Is that in my control? Yes or no?
Mm, yeah, that was a major takeaway for me today too. One other thing, I don't think I wanted to hit it because I'm not a bodybuilder. It sounds like you guys, but you hit on like the four phases of life. I think as dentists, we really focus on the tangible. What can I do to increase my dental skills? How can I increase my efficiencies? What can I do better at the clinic? One thing I know that I always give up on is good sleep habits and good food habits. And I,
Mm,
I do think that's if you want to have a short career, I think those are two guaranteed ways to get you there if you're not eating right and you're not sleeping right. So I realize that's like ingrained into who you two are, but I think a lot of dentists don't realize that, and decades roll through, and all of a sudden, you're maybe overweight, you're sleeping 4 or 5 hours is it a night, and that's gonna kill you at some point. So, um, yeah, I just wanted to circle back to that one little tangent point that you had brought up that I thought was like really a critical point for a lot of dentists that just gets blown past. It's not all about how you can drill and fill. You got to take care of yourself and recover and sleep and eat. So, I thought that was really an awesome take as well.
yeah. And I will say this to like any of your listeners who are kind of finding themselves in that process as well. It's like you need to identify your big movers. Like, what are your main pillars? And sleep, nutrition, exercise should hopefully be a part of all of those things because all of those are going to set you up for success to then be able to do what you're trying to actually be good at. It's like, I don't need to get into the research of how exercise makes you better able to operate, how it gives you better clarity, right? I don't need to talk about how sleep makes you a better decision maker, better at emotional regulation, all of those things. And obviously the nutrition side of things. And so, like, as dentists, especially if you've got expendable funds, if you don't have time to like sit down and meal prep for the week, that's where you probably need to sit down and say, okay, what does my budget look like to get food meal prepped for me?
Yeah.
Because that is one of those things that should be of high priority. So that way you're not just door dashing fast food from across the street from your practice every single day.
It's foundational. Yeah, I think if you bounce back to that concept, if you set those things as your foundation, and you're so right. In fact, I see a lot of practice owners that have more cash than they know what to do with. But yeah, they're going across the street to Panda Express at lunch 3 or 4 times a week, and it's okay to do that every now and again, probably. But yeah, I think that's such a good point. Just a little bit of effort could lock that in, and you could set yourself up so much better.
Can't be making millions of dollars if you're dead.
And that's what I was thinking is the guy working, Alex mentioned he's 80, right? The dude plays golf 3 times a week. So he walks, he never rides on golf carts. As 80 years old carrying a bag, I mean, that's pretty good exercise.
That is pretty good.
Uh, and he's all part of all these book clubs. He gets 8 hours of sleep a night. And he's told me he's done this his whole 48-year career. And I point to him and I say, that's how you last 48 years
Mhm.
is those excellent foundational habits. So yeah, we've had a lot of great like psychological principles, how to reframe things. But if you're a nuts and bolts type person, don't don't forget on the really simple nuts and bolts things that maintain who we all are as humans, not just as dentists.
Yeah, and don't underestimate the compound effects of doing little things well for a long period of time,
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
nutrition, like sleep, like recovery, like being present with your relationships. All those things add up, which then if you're checking all those boxes, you're going to allow yourself or put yourself in the best position to then be a better dentist anyways. So I wouldn't say that trying to balance those things should be the goal. It's learning how do I integrate those things? Because we also know balance is not going to be like, hey, I can allot 25% of time to this, 25% of time to this, 25% of this. But what you can do is be very intentional about the quality of presence that you are giving to the things when you do show up for them. Even if it's only, 15, 20 minutes that I can give to a spouse or a friend on a given day, it's like, I'm going to give you the full quality of my attention and my presence while I'm doing this. And then I
Uh-huh.
can get back to doing the other things for 3 hours.
Yep. Yep. And doing it
Well,
full force. Yeah.
yeah.
Yep.
What kind of clients are you specifically only with athletes, or I guess like in bodybuilding, you have like lifestyle clients, general population. Um, is there like a population you've been wanting to break into, or you really want to stick to athletics?
No, I'm very open to working with different types of people, different walks of life. I've actually found myself geared more towards like business owners recently. So when I started the business, it was really just, hey, I'm going to focus on bodybuilders. But then what ended up happening is like, I help people with like the bodybuilding side of things. And then they recognize like, oh, hey, I'm also a business owner. I am a coach, right? I have like a construction company and I also recognize how these mental performance skills can benefit me in this other arena. And so it's like for some of my bodybuilding clients, like we started working with bodybuilding. We don't even talk about bodybuilding anymore. We really just talk about like,
I love
how
that.
are you optimizing your leadership within your company? How are you optimizing the way you're showing up? That how are you handling days where you might have a big loss? How do you navigate having a big win? And
Hmm.
so understanding like the business side of things, one being a business owner myself, but then also understanding how do I use these same tools that make pilots really effective, that make bodybuilders really effective, and then translating that over to businesses as well. Definitely something that I've been doing a lot more of recently and looking to do more of in the future.
In that case, as we're wrapping this up,
Hmm.
as usual, I could keep talking to you for like there's so many things I feel like we didn't imposter syndrome, we didn't talk about. Honestly, like confidence and all that stuff. Please, where can people find you? All your socials, email, like whatever you want to give the people.
So Gmail is grocha at empc, or sorry, grocha empc at gmail.com. So GROCHA at gmail.com if you want to reach me via email. But I mostly just operate my business off of Instagram, and my Instagram handle is Rocha, ROCHA underscore sports psych.
Psych, like psychology. So
Yeah.
Rocha underscore sport psych.
Yeah.
Um, I find that in dentistry, I love the dental conference as much as the next person, but we're all surrounded by teeth. It's all we talk and think about. And I recently joined this business networking group, or I hope to join this business networking group. I have to apply. But I found that speaking to people outside of dentistry at this point in my life has been more helpful. And so the reason I asked about what kind of clients you're looking for is because we have a lot of business owners. We have a lot of people that hope to be business owners. And I think all the stuff that you talked about, mental excellence, um, excellent performance, high performance, is something that I think dentists may not traditionally think they need or want, but might be more helpful than the guy who just knows dentistry. And so if anyone is listening and has thought about, again, everyone's going to say the same thing, taking their career to the next level. But you think about the best athletes, they were never one sport athletes, you know, the best basketball players. You look at all the European players, they played soccer when they were younger. They did all these different sports. So I think as dentists, getting someone who is an expert with military, with athletes and business owners, obviously, I highly, highly, highly suggest and would really love everyone to check out Gabriel's Instagram and reach out to him. Um, from what I've heard from from your clients that are mutual friends,
Mhm.
you are indispensable. You are incredible at what you do. And if you think about it, dentistry is a high performance sport. And that's not a cliche. I'm not like, we walk in every day, we have to do the actual clinical work, and then we have to show up for our staff, and we have to show up for our patients. We have to put on that face, and then we have to go home and talk to our significant others. Or even if you're single and in that business or dental season, you got to go home and commit time to learning the craft. And it's just not sustainable if you don't know how to optimize and prioritize your life. So everyone, Rocha underscore sports psych, right? At on
Rocha underscore.
Rocha, I'm so sorry. Rocha underscore sports psych. Guys, please check out his content. Reach out to him. Thank you. Thank you so much for your time. I hope in a year we have you back and maybe
Yeah, this was
less.
amazing.
And yeah, it's seriously these quote unquote non-traditional guests on these dental podcasts that I have been getting the most out of
Definitely.
personally. Thank you a million times. I mean, if anyone has any closing thoughts.
No, I would say the same thing, man. We've done, I don't know, 20 of these, and I'd say every other one I maybe get something to take home. I wrote like you guys, I'm sure you see me, but I take notes during all of our talks, and I took 3 pages of sticky notes that I like want to implement in my life and in our business. So that's never happened. I'm like, I can't wait to get home and break this down and kind of give it a little bit more thought. But this was awesome, Gabe. So thanks for meeting early on a Sunday morning. I'm sure you took away from your girlfriend's time, so thank you for giving up some of that to be with us. We certainly appreciate it, and you gave me some life changes. So thank you.
Thank you guys for having me on. I've only done probably a handful of podcasts, like probably 7 or 8 episodes total now. But every time I get on one of these, I'm kind of smacked in the face with like a level of appreciation where, and some of it might be my own imposter syndrome where I'm like, why do these people want to listen to anything that I have to say, let alone someone like in the dental industry, right? Um, but I'm a bit gobsmacked every time I get off one of these podcasts, and I'm just like, damn, like one, that was a really great conversation that fed my soul because I got to talk about the thing that I'm passionate about. But
Hmm.
two, if I can help anyone, even just from listening to this episode, then I'm really happy with that. And hopefully, it doesn't take a year for us to get on another episode. But if any of your listeners have any questions at all, like please feel free to reach out to me directly via email, via DM, etc. I'm sure they're going to have all my info, and then they can pass that information along if you have someone that reaches out to you guys directly.
Absolutely.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Let's have a great morning, guys. Happy Sunday,
Hey,
everyone.
All right,
happy Sunday.
all right guys.
Bye.